Welcome to the Bluerose Files. I am your host, the Bluerose Agent. Thank you for joining me. Tonight, we open a file from the classrooms of our public education system, a story of children, their exceptional gifts, and a government that may have wanted to weaponize them. This is the case of the GATE program kids. For millions of Americans in the 1980s, GATE, or the Gifted and Talented Education Program, was just a class for the smartest students. A place where you went to build rockets or solve logic puzzles while your classmates were doing long division. But in the darker corners of the internet, a different narrative has taken shape. That the GATE program, particularly in the 1980s, was a quiet psychic dragnet. The claim is simple. The US government, fresh off decades of Cold War paranoia and mind control experiments, needed a new generation of remote viewers and psychic spies. The official GATE testing, the IQ scores, the pattern recognition tests, the nonverbal assessments were allegedly a cover. They weren't just looking for the academically bright, they were looking for the psychically gifted. Imagine being an exceptional child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, pulled into a separate room. Instead of a math problem, you're asked to describe a picture hidden in a sealed envelope, or to mentally track the movement of an object miles away. These children, the story goes, were the unwitting candidates for a domestic civilian version of the very real, very secret U.S. military unit known as Project Stargate. The claim rests on the testimony of a few anonymous or single-source accounts, survivors who claim they weren't just learning advanced geometry, but actively being tested for telepathy, precognition, and remote viewing. The classroom was merely the recruiting station, the ultimate goal, to turn America's brightest children into its first wave of child psychic soldiers, a real-world Stranger Things or Firestarter scenario playing out in the fluorescent glow of a suburban schoolhouse. To properly assess the claim that American classrooms were used as a training ground for psychic espionage, we must look at the two major documented pillars of this conspiracy theory: the reality of the GATE programs and the chillingly authentic reality of the U.S. government's obsession with parapsychology. The reality of gifted education, GATE. Let's start with the visible structure, the one that millions of parents trusted, the Gifted and Talented Education Program. The idea of identifying and nurturing America's brightest students didn't appear suddenly in the 1980s. Its precursors have existed since the early 20th century, but the concept truly surged into national prominence during the height of the Cold War. The Soviet launch of Sputnik in 1957 sent a wave of panic through the American educational system. The immediate, almost desperate drive was to identify and nurture America's intellectual assets for national defense. If the enemy had better rockets, we needed better scientists, and we needed to find them early. This is the legitimate historical context. GATE was driven by national security through academic excellence. However, by the time we hit the 1980s, the program was actually under increased scrutiny. Yet, despite this scrutiny, federal interest remained high. In 1988, Congress passed the Jacob Javits Gifted and Talented Students Education Act. This act poured funding into research and improved programs, confirming a strong federal focus on giftedness, but, and this is the critical distinction, solely in an educational and developmental capacity. Now, we come to the absolute core of the mystery, the missing link. The digital age has brought about massive declassifications of government documents, freeing information that intelligence agencies kept secret for decades. Yet, in all of these releases, in all the educational records, congressional testimony, and funding bills, there are 0 declassified documents or official educational records that link the academic GATE program directly to psychic testing. The criteria for admission were uniform. They were focused on achieving high IQ scores, often requiring students to score in the 98th percentile or higher, and demonstrating exceptional academic performance, not ESP potential. The GATE program was a system built for the identification of intellectual outliers, a perfect vessel for a conspiracy. But so far, the vessel appears empty of psychic spies. The reality of parapsychology research. This leads us to our second pillar of evidence, which is where the story gets undeniably strange and true. The U.S. government's interest in the psychic realm wasn't a matter of science fiction, it was a matter of fact. The U.S. government did spend decades and millions of taxpayer dollars on parapsychology research. The most famous example is Project Stargate, established in 1977 and operating through the 1980s and into 1995. This was not a rumor. This was a real, funded, and ultimately declassified program. The primary focus of Stargate was remote viewing, the attempt to psychically describe a distant, hidden target using the power of the mind. This was a dedicated, small unit of professional psychics and military personnel, working primarily out of Fort Meade, Maryland, and in conjunction with contractors like the Stanford Research Institute. Now, this is the crucial point that fuels the fire. Classified CIA documents released to the public explicitly show that the agency was interested in identifying gifted individuals for intelligence collection. One declassified document mentions directing effort toward the investigation of the opportunities for the operational use of gifted individuals. This proves the concept that the military intelligence complex was hunting for individuals with unusual innate talents for covert use was absolutely real. And of course, we cannot forget the precedent set by Project MKUltra. We know the CIA previously conducted deeply illegal and unethical human experimentation. MKUltra, active from the 1950s to the early 1970s, involved the non-consensual use of drugs like LSD, electroshocks, and other forms of psychological manipulation, including documented experiments on children at institutions like Bellevue Hospital. This establishes a chilling historical precedent for government agencies conducting unethical research on vulnerable populations. So the case is less about if the government looked for psychic talent and more about where they looked. Did they really utilize a public school system, a system designed to help children, as a quiet, massive, nationwide hunting ground for psychic soldiers? That is the line between confirmed history and deep-seated Cold War terror. The official verdict for case file is unconfirmed. While there is no concrete, verifiable evidence, no smoking gun memos, no official testimonies, no former gate teacher whistleblowers, that proves the gifted and talented education program was a direct psychic testing front. The rumor is not born from a vacuum. This conspiracy theory is the perfect synthesis of three documented American truths. 1. Paranoia. The Cold War-era government spent massive resources on parapsychology, Stargate. 2. Precedent. The government has a history of unethical experimentation on citizens, including children, MKUltra. 3. The container. The GATE program was the perfect, legitimate, highly selective vessel to identify subjects considered different or exceptional. The claim that psychic talent was screened through the GATE program is the narrative shadow cast by the real, declassified operations of Stargate and the chilling legacy of MKUltra. Even with the official closure of Project Stargate in 1995, the questions linger like an unresolved thought. 1. What criteria did the military and CIA use to source new subjects for Stargate during the 1980s? Were all participants established adults, or were non-government sources ever explored, given the known Soviet interest in training psychic children? 2. Did any private, high IQ organizations, like the Monroe Institute, whose leadership included the former Stargate director Skip Atwater, offer programs for children in the 1980s and 90s that explored parapsychology? 3. To what extent did the public obsession with gifted children and the superchild during the Cold War drive unauthorized or unreported testing outside of official government channels? The Bluerose is a rare phenomenon, often misidentified and always hidden. The truth of the Psychic Gate kids remains just as elusive. While we cannot prove or disprove without a doubt the existence of secret research and recruiting of our children in the GATE program, there are certainly many who claim something more was happening to them in those programs. For now, we will leave it open. Was this a real secret program, or just a misremembered, culturally driven manifestation of another government program? For those listening, don't forget to subscribe. The Woods watch back. I think I'll get a piece of pie and black coffee for the road. Until next time, good night.